Good morning. Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Let's see what
Quick question while people are filing in.
am I doing? Ask me.
I was real life got distracted me and I totally missed the deadline. I want to take Intro to New Testament. Is it too late to sign up?
No, I told Emma, the more the merrier.
Okay, I will sign up today after class.
Thank you.
You actually, hey, for the future,
Yes.
you have up until the day before the class starts to sign up, as long as it's not full. That's the only thing that would ever stop you, is that if she says, I'm only taking X number of students and they've already got X number of students, that's the only reason it would stop you. Leslie taught me well.
That's good because I haven't signed up for next. I got to sign up. I'm wrestling with whether or not to take 2 classes or 1.
What are you looking at taking?
If I do take 2, I'll take communication with Kurt Gwartney and Christian ethics with George Flanagan.
Flanagan, George, he's awesome. So's Kurt.
This session has given me so many takeaways that I kind of want to like think about them. I kind of want to marinate on what I learned this time, and I don't want to forget it when I plunge into the next, you know?
Right. I'm trying to think. Kurt's class, I think, has a lot of assignments of sorts. I don't remember off the top of my head. One of my my mentees, coaches, really, I coach him. He's had both classes. I don't know. I know people who've taken a couple, 2 classes at a time. I mean, even those who do really well are in classes who really are who do very well in classes, that even they have said that taking 2 classes is a lot. They'll say, what the heck was I thinking?
I've been taking 2 classes at a time since I started, which was, it's not bad now, but when I was coaching, preaching, and teaching, it was a lot.
Ethics is pretty intense. I remember taking ethics and it is a lot of reading and there's a lot. So
But my issue right now is I want to marinate in and do the things that I've learned, because I'm in this in worship with Jeff right now. And there are a lot of things I want to do. Like I want to like work with my board to like enact a lot of these things. And I don't want another class like that's going to take away from what I'm trying to do from this session. I almost want just classes that are like head knowledge, not application in my ministry.
Lucy, have you had with Kurt yet? Have you had his communications? Kurt's class really is hands-on. He's going to introduce you, if you aren't familiar with Canva, not Canvas, Canva.
Oh yeah, I use that all the time.
Oh, good. You'll be 10 steps ahead. I told Leslie I need to take it just to learn Canva better.
Yeah, Canva's the one where you like make graphics and newsletters, and yeah, I use that all the time for my church. They always want to put together, this sounds terrible, but these really ugly old flyers with 85 different colors and fonts and pictures that are far away that no one knows what's going on. I'm like, no, people, like, we got to put out good looking messaging or no one's going to look at it.
At least they're putting things out. I visited a church once that had brochures out and or flyers. No, they were brochures about their church, and they featured their minister who hadn't been there in 8 years. I was like, oh my gosh, I long remember that church. Well, I want us to get started. I thought I'd start by showing you these fractals that that I've worked with, this invite, connect, disciple, go is how I think of these. We call them the 4 core ministries. And you can see then how I break them down. So in the invite, you get worship, networking, attraction, events, and marketing. I just sat in on another workshop. I've been sitting in on business workshops. A lot of what I've learned has come out of business seminars and workshops. And people will say, well, the church isn't a business. And I will say back that a lot of our churches have more money in their budgets than many small businesses. So we are a business in Jesus's business, if you will. And this one was around marketing. And she was saying how a lot of entrepreneurs don't like to market, but that's for us, that's that evangelism. How are we getting word out? How are we inviting people in? Another piece for me about worship being inviting, worship still is usually the front door into the church. Somebody comes, worship is still that number one way, not the only way and a declining way, but it's still the main way. But worship isn't just about our services, it's about inviting, I'll say, is also about inviting people into that relationship with God and with Jesus. So, how are we doing that as well? So once we have people come, then what we have to do is connect with them. And so you can see there, we're talking about hospitality, greeters, ushers, hosts. How do we do guest follow-up, member care, fellowship is another one here, though. Member care tends to be that, how are we caring for our people? A lot of us that are enthralled with evangelism forget that there are people within the congregation that we need to be attending to as well. And when we're trying to switch our structures, move structures, one of our challenges is that we're bringing people in under a new structure. It's easier to implement fractals when you're cross-talking in a way. You're using the language that you have in your bylaws within your congregation, but you're shaping a new way of looking. And you want your new people to to come into this new way of looking, but a lot of your long timers aren't going to make that shift. So how are you, ensuring that you're helping them come along and come over? When you're trying to switch structures, one of the best additions you can make to your staff is a retired minister who loves to take care of people and do home visits, and let them run with your member care, your hospital visits and all of that. And then there's discipling, small groups, courses, seminars, accountability, journey groups, mentoring and apprenticing is one way to begin thinking about moving people along. And then going community, regional, national, global. That's how I tend to look at going. How are we reaching within our local community? And today I would take that even down lower into the neighborhood, and then regional, national, and then global. What's our touch there? And then here's that when we think, let's see, I'm not going to be able to do it. There I did. When we talk about fractals, we have to remember we have administrative ministries. And again, this is one that I've used in a congregation I serve. I thought, or think of administrative ministries as property, finance, administration, and human resources. And so you can see property, building and grounds, custodial, capital improvements, and futuring. It used to be in churches, if you can find any old envelopes in your church, or you may still use them, you'll see line items. In your envelope, is this for the the budget? Is it for a special fund? Is it for the building fund? And a lot of times that building fund, or capital improvements, and then capital improvements got merged in with building fund. There's a lot of churches, remember it was butts and seats, bucks and building. And so it, it used to be we measured church success by were we building onto our building. But so we collapsed them when we realized, oh, we have our building to take care of. But a lot of our churches have deferred maintenance and we don't have capital improvements anymore. So just think about that. Those of you that pastor or you sit on boards, remember, don't leave out or don't let capital improvement thinking escape you, or you're going to be looking at $250,000 repairs that have to be made. Finance, stewardship, income, outgo, and investments and endowments. Try to keep income and outgo separate so that they talk to one another, but things aren't decided because of income. Ever notice in your board meetings, they make the board reports and we talk about what we want to do, and then we get the realistic budget report that then tells us we can't really do anything because our budget doesn't allow for it. Administration, office management, volunteer coordination. That's using those personal ministry assessments, spiritual gifts. How are we going to release people? Volunteer coordination, insurance and compliance, and then PR and legal. Who are your legal folks that are in that? And then human resources, professional staff, volunteer staff. What would it be like if we said to all of our leaders, hey, folks, we are going to hold you to the same evaluative standards that we do our ministers, so that we were looking at all of our effectiveness in that regard. What are our policies? Somebody who checks policies every now and again, and then global human resources. And quite honestly, I do not know what that means anymore. And in conflict, we look at breaking down human resources. A lot of us have these pastoral relations, pastor parish committees, pastor congregation relationships, something like that. There are 3 or 4 different ways of calling them. Basically what they are is triangulation. So when somebody has a problem with the minister, they can go talk to the personnel committee or the pastoral relations committee and whine there, instead of talking to the minister. Or if it's something you don't like about the worship service, you'll complain to the minister. If the minister doesn't give in and play all the songs that you want to be played, then they go to your pastoral relations committee rather than the worship committee. Anyways, it tends to triangulate. Triangulation, right, is when I don't go to you when I have a problem. I'm going to go to somebody else, call them in, and I'll talk through them rather than through you. So that structure really is about triangulation, and what's a better model for working with pastors and congregation is really literally human resources. That evaluations come through with people who get human resources, and people who are well differentiated, not people who just are listening to everybody and want to make everybody happy. Ministers need a prayer team. So who's praying for the pastor? Who are those people? Having a team of say 5 or 6 people, and their job is to pray for pastor. And somebody takes Monday praying, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So you've got the prayer aspect under pinning the pastor. And I think this is at First Christian Columbia, and I don't know this, but I was told the story here in Missouri that underneath the pulpit is a chair, or is the space. And it's not done anymore, but I don't know, maybe it's the legend, is that people would go and sit underneath the pulpit during the worship service and while the pastor was preaching, and be praying for the minister underneath that. Isn't that beautiful, that thought? So, this thought that you have this prayer team, and at least one person, and maybe more than that, maybe the whole team is just holding the minister in prayer and the congregation in prayer during the worship service. So, having that prayer, that spirit support, not just for the minister, but for the minister's family. And then the third component there is a celebratory piece. So this is the team that remembers pastor's anniversary. African-American churches, traditional or historically African-American churches have anniversary celebrations, and they celebrate a big pastor's anniversary. And I hate to sound a generalist like that, but I've seen that across the country in disciples and Methodist churches are the ones with it, which I'm most familiar. But I just love the first time it was in the Methodist church. My first official mentor into ministry was an African-American minister, and he had been assigned into an all-white church, and they were getting ready to celebrate homecoming and pastor's anniversary. And it just sounded like the coolest thing going. And Women's Day was this other one I love. So anyways, that is part of this, is celebrating pastor's anniversary, remembering that, keeping it in front of the congregation, celebrating pastors, if they're married, pastors' wedding anniversary, if remembering their birthday. Pastor or recognition month is October, making sure that pastors recognized, even every week, remembering the family, their children, their spouse, again, if there's a spouse, their mother and dad, or who's there, that those significant adults, family adults that are part of their family. So do you see what I'm trying to do? One, you've got the spiritual aspect. It's not that all this other isn't or can't be spiritual, but you want your prayer warriors there, the ones who get prayer, who do the prayer. The minister who introduced me to that was here in Missouri, many years in this congregation. And so I did it as a regional minister, and I needed to get to know people a little bit better in the region, but I invited them. I got with another minister who did spiritual direction. She was my first spiritual director here. And I asked her if she would bring us together and then do a retreat for us once or twice a year, or 2 or 3 times a year. And at first she said no. She said, I don't want this to be something like the church has done forever, and we just come together and it's whatever. I won't do it. And I came back to her and said, what if we were serious about this, and people had to check in, and they had to come to the retreats, and they had to be doing this work of prayer, and they took responsibility? She said, well, if you can get people to do that, I will do that. Well, we got people to do it. And she was part of that for about 3 or 4 years before she stepped back. And we were on the phone every month together. If I had a need, I was able to call them. I personally didn't go into a lot of detail, because I feel like ministers are there to serve their people, not to build a codependent relationship where they're taking care of you. So I have my pastor, I have my mentors, I have my spiritual directors, accountability people, but there's still those times that I need to make that, one of my, he was the board chair for the area. He was arrested 2 days before my installation because he thought he was talking to a 12-year-old boy on the phone and invited him over, but really it was an officer that he invited over there. And so immediately and I'm not going to tell you anything everybody who's been in any kind of leadership knows, or reads the papers and everything else. And it got, of course, he's a minister, retired minister, it's dragged everywhere. But in those immediate moments, not knowing exactly details, not knowing exactly what could happen, I could put my prayer people into place and say, honestly, because we have an installation tomorrow, and Dennis is going to be obviously missing. So, to say Dennis has been arrested, I'm not able to share any details. I don't even have details. But the one thing, if you could just hold him in this whole scenario, in place, and it was happening. We were able to move through our steps, right? So those are those prayer warriors, the ones that you want to be working human resources. Again, you don't want people that are emotionally driven, that are going to get caught into being triangulated, that are going to turn codependent. They're going to try to make everybody happy. You want someone who really knows about working, has worked in some form of a management type of position, who understands human resources. Don't know, I'm not coming up with words, but hopefully you understand me, that has at least had experience with having to or getting to have oversight of employees or workers, because you are an employee of the church, right? Does that make sense? Questions, pushback? Okay.
Annie, or have you shared this graphic with us?
I had not.
I see this one.
Yeah, no, I was trying to, I realized 2 weeks ago that when they migrated my courses from whatever we were on, Moodle into Canvas, that my PDFs didn't come over as PDFs, they came over as files. And so Ginger had texted me a couple, 3 weeks and said, hey, I can't download. She'd been trying to download them, and she said, I can't download them. And so I went back and, well, in one case, Leslie actually turned it into a PDF, and I wasn't catching on what was going on. So I spent yesterday trying to put up, I'm not done, get the PDFs back, or put the files back into PDFs, which then meant I had to find the files on my external drive, which then I found this one in my external drive. I was like, oh, wow, I should pull that one out. So yeah, I haven't, but it may be up there now. I'm trying to remember. It may be up there, but I'll make sure it is. And I would, as
I was trying to write down the last one and I didn't get them all.
Okay, yep. I'll make sure it's posted, and I'll put it in. I'll put it up there.
To say something about the prayer, Dr. Chris.
Oh, yes, Daniel.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the lifting the pastor and the family in prayers, I just want to share my experience here with you.
Please.
We do this basically where I come from. Especially when the pastor is on the pulpit praying, we have the prayer warrior group in the prayer room, praying for the pastor while he's preaching.
Wow.
Now, our point of prayer is our intercessory prayers, for the word, to touch the heart of the congregant, that is sowing a seed through the word, and the word should germinate in the heart of the congregant. It shouldn't go through the right ear and go out through the left ears. So now those are the prayer points. Then we also pray against, the bad people or evil people shooting arrows or attacking him based on the word. Because when African pastors are preaching over there is a lot different. More you expose the kingdom of darkness, more you talk about attack, deliverance, and what have you during the prayer session. So that's most of our preaching styles, But now a lot of things are changing, because a lot of people talking about blessing now, blessing. They just want blessing, want money from Okama. So what the point I'm trying to make is that when I came in here, I've been to different churches. My first contact was African American church, and then I was a minister there. From there, when I moved down to another city, I now attend the white church, right? So, but it's different. When I come up with this, even when the pastor is not around, probably they want on vacation, and I'm leading prayers, I'll start like the way we do it where I came from to put them in the hand of the Lord, like praying for that, oh, God protect Pastor ABC and the family and blah, blah, blah. And people look at me like, why do you have to go to that extent praying for them? God will definitely protect them. You don't have to mention their name. So when you now mention it now, I was like, so really, whatever I'm doing may be right, but maybe it's just in a different way. Then I also remember that I belong to a drama group, right? And when we present in drama, most times we expose the kingdom of darkness. Like we expose what they do in the dark world, to let the people know that Christ is more powerful than whatever they are doing. Christ can deliver you from whatever attack and whatever you may have experienced. We also have people separated. If 3 people are on the stage now, right? The other group will be behind the stage, praying for those people on the stage. And while praying is not, before you go to the stage, you don't eat, you don't drink, because it's spiritual. So you are strictly ready for that battle. Even at that, we still get attacked. Yeah, on the stage. People faint, people fall down, and by the grace of God, they back to life, But I'm just sharing this because when you mentioned it, I was like, okay, because I begin to have different impression. I'm trying as much as possible to get into the style that is being used here, because whatever I'm bringing from there is totally different. So when you now mention, I'm like, okay, I think I need to share this.
Yes.
So that I can, I can feel free that, okay, even if I'm bringing it, it's still good. We still have people praying. Though we have our prayer group that pray for people when they have challenges, but I've never really seen American people, to say in general, or American Christian in general, like coming down together, holding hands in connection, spiritual connectivity, to pray hard and sweat out, and something happened. So I've not really, maybe I've not gotten to that extent, but I've not really experienced that. So if anybody want to shed light to that, so that I can have a better understanding, I don't feel, like I really want to feel belong. I've been feeling belong. They've been treating me good, but it's like my style is really different. So that's what I just want to share.
Do not give up and don't conform. Do not conform or we have to work within the parameters, the boxes, right, of where we are. But there are those, if you will, truths, right, the big T truths that are real and we can't compromise on. And what you're talking about is are things that we've either lost or have never been taught. And I can only speak for the US. I've seen it in African-American churches that I've worked with. I can see that both ways, a deep spirituality. And then like one of the churches here and the ministers I've worked closely with in Northeast Missouri, I just keep saying, you have got the whitest Black church I've ever seen. It's this, most of the people are Black, but it's like, oh my gosh, we're following this, and there's not a freedom that I see in other churches or a commitment that I've seen in other churches. Yes, please hold on to it, because, again, this is something that some of us, I think, are fortunate enough to have gotten to experience or to see, and usually by people who are not in mainline traditions or who've had touch with charismatic traditions, that then have mentored us in their own ways to do that. One of the things I miss about house church, being in house church, was that time for prayer. And we really struggled with, to plant or to spin off house churches. We had a house church movement. And so to spin off house churches, you had to quickly raise up leaders that, or recognize leaders, give them that support, help them with where they would, start another house church, and then provide them with coaching and not money support, but supporting them in training and whatnot. And so in lifting people up, we used to go around the room praying. Okay. And first we'd go around the room, everybody would share their prayer requests around the circle. And then we'd have the designated prayer. And so at first in our home, the designated prayer would either be Bill or me. And then we got to talking, it was, why should we be the designated prayers? So we, were identifying people that we knew, could pray. And so then they would be the identifying prayer. And then it was, what the heck is this? Is everybody sharing? Why don't we just pray? And that in our time, when we would do that as part of the, people would come, talk, check in with each other. We'd have dinner, talk more. Sometimes communion we'd do that with dinner, really it was like the meal, part of the meal. And then we would take whatever our focus was, our scripture, and we'd have questions for them, and they'd break into small groups, talk. And then we come back together for praying. And so by that time now, you've talked to different people. So if you feel called to intercede for somebody, then you're going to pray for them right there. And the one thing that then Bill and I did, we would always have somebody, usually somebody that we were kind of getting ready to ask to start a group, but we would ask them, if you hear of a need or someone who's not being prayed for, will you help us attend to that? Because we didn't want, everyone to be prayed for, everybody that you knew. We wanted that to be a possibility. So we went through that part, and then somehow one night, well, if somebody needed specific prayer or asked for it, and usually it was healing prayer, then we would put a chair in the middle of the living room, and then whoever wanted would gather around them and would lay hands or put their hands near them, and we would pray. And so we just got started. We called it the chair of prayer. And every week we would put a chair in the middle of our, it wasn't a big living room, in the middle of the living room. And then as needed, if anybody felt they needed that specific prayer, then they would come into the chair. And I miss that so much. It's that generative prayer that we don't do. And I've been criticized. I was criticized I've been in 2 churches because when I pray, I have to write down like, okay, don't forget to pray about this or that, because you're praying the congregational prayer and all this, stuff. And so I'll write that, but I really do believe that the Spirit tells us what to pray and how to pray, and it comes to us. And so it is not this headpiece for me. And so I get criticized for not praying fluently and for not praying loudly enough. And that's because when I pray, my voice, and you'll hear me in different times, like when it comes to talking that deep spiritual stuff, when the Spirit is speaking, my voice is just down. And I've said, I'm trained in public speaking. I can do all that. But when it comes to prayer, I go to a different place and I'm not listening to modulate or anything else. So a lot of times I'll write my prayers out because that's my own stuff that I carry, right? Yeah. But yeah.
I think, Daniel, I understand what you're talking about, but I think, and this is what I tell, actually, because I'm in a white congregation too. And, I come from that tradition where you honor your pastor, you do so the church that I am in right now, they had a pastor that we have 3 pastor emeritus. The one was there for almost 40 years and really did awesome stuff. It was the early 1900s where the echo community and Christian unity, and was really strong on that, really revived the church. He is buried out in the church cemetery and they do nothing to honor him, and it drives me totally insane. So I go, so I went like to our secretary and I said, do you guys like do anything like to honor the fact that this is like your patriarch of your church? Like, really? That you guys don't do anything? And she kind of looked at me funny. And she said, you know what, we probably should. And I was thinking something simple, like we just have a day, like we go get a grave saddle and we decorate his grave for Christmas, something not even that complicated. And I'm like, I can't believe this guy, because the church, the Great Depression, the church was really struggling. And he really, by the time he was done with his ministry, the church had like 700 people. And it was like, I cannot believe that you guys don't honor, have that sense of history. And they kind of looked at me and said, well, he's kind of just the pastor, they just kind of like treated him like an employee. It was very weird. And I think that as African Americans, we have to realize, we don't have that European tradition. And I think, when you're talking to me about what the Black church does, is I go, whoa, that's because we didn't originate in Europe. We don't have that style of church. But I also went to white churches where they're very spiritual too.
Exactly.
And I think you have to realize, and I tell people, okay, you have to understand the Reformation, and we just think about, the Protestants versus the Catholics, and you go, there was all different stripes of people. You had the Quakers, you had all different types of groups, and some that weren't even named. They were just very small. So I think that's kind of one of the problems of navigating North American church, is that you have to sit down for a minute and go, okay, which version of Protestantism are you? And you have to kind of think about how that originated. Like seeing this chart here is like, okay, now this week's assignment makes sense. Now I understand what we were trying to talk about, because I actually said in my group, I don't understand the question. And I realize, okay, you're coming from the African American tradition, and there's a part of European tradition that you're not getting. But seeing this, I go, okay, now I get what the whole question was this week. I'm going to have to think about it a little bit more, but now I get it.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. Yes.
I'm so glad you said that, because I felt the same way. I was like, that ain't how we operate. And a lot of this I was missing. I mean, I get it from a head knowledge perspective, but applying it of how and really grabbing it, yeah, that's not how we operate. And so I was struggling with it. I answered it from my perspective. But yeah, I was seeing the chart, kind of, okay, looking at it from that angle, I see what he was trying to get at. I'm glad you went ahead and said it, because that's what I was thinking this week too.
Thank you. So that helps me to know I've got to go back here and rethink these sections of the course to make sure that we're working. And that's going to give me a chance to update that, where I would be thinking more these days, or where I'm thinking more these days in terms of that. Well, and to say this fractal model actually comes out of an evangelical, charismatic, well, yeah, he's charismatic, somewhat. Foursquare, Wayne Cordero is a Foursquare minister. Yeah, good. And, my favorite sociology professor his parents were Baptist missionaries to Brazil, and he was born in Brazil and raised there, and they moved back to the States when he was, I think, 13 or 14, and it was the first time he'd been with people who didn't speak Portuguese, and that which was his native language, and he talked about some of the I guess customs, but not customs. People would have like women who would sweep out their kitchen, and there were certain prayers that they would sweep, and it was the sweeping out of spirits and that awareness of spirits. And that was one of the teachings he would bring home. And he was also he was head of sociology, anthropology, and in his anthro classes as well. And he said, it's the culture that allows them to see parts of the spirit that others of us haven't, we haven't been taught that. It's been taken away from us. And when you think about the mystics, right, the people 12, 1300s, 1400s, these mystics that we raise up that were Catholic, they're talking about these mystical spirit prayer experiences, and experience that come through prayer and contemplation that the church has just blown off for centuries. And Matthew Fox, who was a Catholic priest back in the late 1980s, really, he rediscovered, I'm sure before that, Meister Eckhart, and started writing with Meister Eckhart's teachings, and then bringing in other mystics and created creation spirituality. And he started leaning more and more on the mystics and teaching from that perspective. And the church, Big C Church, came back to him and told him, no, that's heresy, you can't do this. And they ended up defrocking him. Now he's a defrocked priest. But I don't know, it's when I was in seminary, I read one of his books, and I was sold.
That aspect that you just described there with the defrocking, part of what I've been hearing is the spiritual warfare aspect of what happens within congregations and staff. And I think in our culture, I've been doing a lot of study lately on cultural Christianity, and that we've lost the aspect that the congregation is only as healthy as the leadership is. And if the leadership is under attack, then the congregation is under attack. And if the congregation wants to be healthy, then they're going to do what they need to do or can do to be protective of, or supportive, or however you want to phrase it, of the clergy. And every time you have fallen clergy, or let's say young clergy that say, I'm sacrificing my family for this, I'm going to change jobs. That's an indicator of a failure of the congregation to be protective of and in prayer for and aware of the spiritual warfare aspect of things, and to understand that the best way to attack a congregation is to attack the minister. And this whole aspect of what we've covered this week has made me think a lot more in terms of how important it is to go after what we do intentionally rather than just as a natural thing. It's like looking at these fractals and these quadrants. You can walk into a lot of groups that are accomplishing these, but they're not doing it intentionally. And then when you're not doing it intentionally, it's easy to leave a hole that, when then you address it, you get those blank looks of, or even the aspect of, well, we've always done it this way, tradition. Well, how come? And there's no comprehension of how it all works together and how important all of it structured together is.
Right. Isn't it Paul? It is, he talks about being blown back and forth by.
Right.
And
why do I do the things I shouldn't do? And why don't I do the things I should do?
Right. And all the time. Yeah. I just think of that, the winds of change. And I know we're talking doctrine there, but we're talking about our practices, and we do lack intentionality. We've got to say, these are the pieces that have to be addressed. How are we doing that? And forgive me if I'm repeating myself from past weeks. I've been watching this whole COVID and now hybrid church and blah, blah, blah stuff. And we want to say, oh, I've got an online church. Well, if your online church isn't inviting, connecting, discipling, and going, sending, going, then I'm sorry, that's not a church. You got online worship. That's all you've got. And so, as people have said, well, are we going to return to the building or not? What about our online worship or online church? No, I'm sorry, you don't have an online church. So it is about that intentionality. And so we did what we thought we needed to do, and we did need to do. And now that we don't need to do it, we have to have a language for it. Do we want to do it? We had to make an excuse for it. Minister types, I see a lot of pride in that. Like, hey, look what we were able to pull off. And you get kind of attached to stuff that you feel good about, and so you don't want to let go of it. But and there, we don't think of that because we don't think of that within our congregation. Let's talk about this, folks. How are we inviting? How are we equipping or connecting? How are we discipling? And how are we going? And if we don't have, and I think you can create a balance the larger you get, right? When you get to be a large enough church where you've got people like in your fractals, where you've actually got staff people, whether paid or unpaid. But if you pay people to do that, when you're at that size, then they've got the time. That's where their investment is, completely there. Although if we do with what we're talking about, we may never have to pay them, which is really scary to a lot of us minister types, because what are we going to do if we don't get paid? And the work, blah, blah. Okay, I'm blathering. I could go all 10 ways with that. But so you've got to have those pieces. That's what makes an effective church. Right. And churches are sustainable. People give to what they know is working. They give because it's that investment in what is happening and what is changing. And we'll talk about the church, will my church be here? Well, folks, what about the kingdom, right? Where's the kingdom in all of that? This is what that, and it is intentional. Tyler, your hand is up.
That's right. Just a real quick thing. Back to one of the first points you made, the pandemic has been a real shake up, wake up for us, because if we were focused on butts and seats, even if we didn't realize it, and all of a sudden there are no butts and seats out of our control, and we feel like we're failing, then our mission wasn't where it should be. And, if we're talking about growing the kingdom, there's ways to grow the kingdom when we can't be together. And I've seen people do it, and so I think, God uses all things for his good purpose. I can't believe that he created the pandemic, but I think he might be using it in a way to really gut check where our heart is on this. Are we set on programs and butts and seats, or making a difference in the world? And I think that's some of the good that's shaken out of this. Maybe the only good.
Yeah. Do I want to do this? I'm doing it. Okay. I watched yesterday. I love Terry Hord Owens. I have to tell you, I don't know where you are with her. Terry Hord Owens is our general minister and president for the Christian Disciples of Christ. And I knew her before she was GMP. And when I heard that she was the person who had been nominated for that, oh my gosh, of course, you couldn't think of a better person than her. And talk about spiritual, this deep depth of spirit that she brings. And I knew Dick Ham pretty well when he was GMP, and he started with that spirit-based place, but with the warfare, you saw that ending. And he left, I think it was 2 years before the end of his term. And it really was the spiritual warfare. And I got to see from the inside what that warfare will do to our spirit and our ministry. It was painful and remains painful to have watched. But if you get a chance, listen to Terry's State of the Church address. It's up on YouTube. I watched it through yesterday, and I found it interesting how things like, well, we're not losing regions. We're just doing a new thing. we didn't merge two regions in the Pacific Northwest. We are just, how did she put it? Some like we've envisioned a new thing. Now Michigan region and the Illinois-Wisconsin region are sharing Teresa Dollier Parker. That's because the Michigan regional minister is retired and Michigan can't afford a regional minister. So now Teresa is going to be, but they're not merging their regions. They're just doing in partnership, covenant partnership. West Virginia, his name is totally leaving me, but the regional minister in West Virginia was the regional minister. Well, now he's working through Pennsylvania, and I think he's picked up a third region, something. I mean, it's just, you can see because regions can't afford, so we're not merging them though. We're working in covenant partnership and we're reacting, and for my dissertation, I had this whole model based on fractals that works from the general and regional and congregational and community. And the reason I went the other way was I would go stark raving mad. And so, we don't have the money. Well, duh. And we're not producing. Churches don't give. Well, we can say, well, that's because churches don't have the money, but the churches don't give when they don't see what they're being supported. And when we hear, well, we're not merging, and it's like, this is where I'm at. It's like, it's the deck chairs being rearranged on the deck of the Titanic. Come on, people, being winded and blown. And I love the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I am intentionally a member of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. It's where I could bring in my theology and work with this. But lately, I hate the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. But it's like I love to hate it, I hate to love it. And I see us, but we're doing this denominationally. The United Methodists are about to tear themselves apart into 2, if not 3 or 4 different denominational kind of pieces. And I'm watching that, and my friends who are, have been in conference ministry, Methodist conference ministry, it's killing them. And, we're trying to figure it out on human, and it's like, where's this spirit pieces? Where's this grounding? Where's this prayer piece where I know is going on in different places, but how are we doing this, from our denominational, it's happening in our congregational pieces and some of these places, but how are we going to make that the blanket, the covering, right? Not just the underpinning, but the whole thing.
Chris, who did you say gave that presentation on the state of the church?
Yep, it's
Terry Hord Owens.
Terry Hord Owens, thank you. I wanted to call her Teresa. Terry Hord Owens. She's our general minister and president for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
Oh, okay.
And I believe the date that shows on it is February 11th.
I found it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, but just just look, okay, and not, it's like you get to a place where you you spend so much time so much time doing consultations that when you go into a church to worship, you're looking at, are the children paying attention? You're looking at the message that the minister's preaching. Wait a minute, where's the call to action? What's the so what in all of that? And you're not worshiping, you're doing this. So unfortunately, that's where I wanted to see what she had to say about, I forget now what it was that I was looking for, and that precluded my listening. So I had to go back and listen to it again. But again, there are those catchphrases that catch me. So I'd be interested, if you listen to it, keeping, taking what we were keeping in class, what we've done here, what maybe how you hear that, or what your prescriptions would be for
Chris, and maybe now we're speaking specifically about Missouri, but I've been on this ordination track, and it's been, my regional minister has changed 4 times since I started this, and you know, it's been tough. And when I ask about it, there's this quiet going on because there's some dissension in the ranks, you know, in this upper level. Our clusters decided we were going to like do this, and they've been my biggest source of accountability on this level. Personally, I've got others, but in this track, and they had a really good conversation with a pastor out of Sedalia. In fact, I'm going to meet with him on Tuesday about, you know, finding a new precept. Yeah, we should talk online about what he's talking to me about sometime, because I need to make some decisions. I'll leave it at that. But anyway, so I think we can make a difference at our individual level, even if maybe the region or the states and seems in turmoil, but we've got our clusters, we've got our classmates and things like that. So there's hope, because discouragement, at least for me, is Satan's easiest tool. I can handle the big stuff, but the death by 1,000 cuts wears you down.
One of my friends along the way called them straw people. She said they stick their straws and suck out your lifeblood. And, yeah, I know. And recognizing that spiritual warfare, we used to tell when I did a lot of work with retreats and young ministers, we would say, as we were getting ready to go, like those of us that were in leadership, we prayed like throughout the day, designated prayers. And so, right, we were taking turns, certain hours of the day. And then when it came time for sharing around the circle, there'd be 2 of us, that our job wasn't to facilitate anything but the protection around the circle. And we would have them pray, we would pray over them, and throughout our prayers would be for spiritual protection, because we knew as soon as they left, and we would tell them, as soon as you leave here within the next 1 to 2 weeks, you're going to be attacked by something. And, and I said this just the other day to somebody. I said, I don't know where you are with spiritual warfare, but we've been hit with it since September in our household, and all we, and you get to this point, all this stuff, which is so ridiculous. And did I say this here before? That, if I were listening to me, I'd say, what the hell is wrong with you, lady? You must be making this up. You must be blowing this out of proportion. But, it was Bill's dad dying. His dad died a week before sabbatical. Then he had to figure out the funeral that had to be rescheduled 3 times. He was back. Our basement flooded with sewage. Then we had to clean everything out of the basement. And, it just goes on and on. The washer machine didn't have hot water. The washer machine doesn't have cold water. That's been twice within 3 months. Let's see, the furnace goes out, right? It's been like this. And 2 of my friends said back to me, you're in the midst of warfare. Well, Bill's on sabbatical working with his business. His business is taking off, right? So you've got all this stuff. In December, he gets a call from the board chair and says, hey, man, I know that you're on sabbatical and I wouldn't call you, but there's this coup going on here from the guy who was the former chair of the elders. And here's this dynamic that's happening, right? And so he's like, wait a minute, what the hell is this? It's like, it's warfare. All we can do is call in our prayer warriors, talk to our people, right? And say, we need you to be praying specifically about this. And the more ridiculous the stuff is, the more it's warfare, and the more you're on the right track, because the enemy, it does not want us to prevail, right? So you pay attention at that. Your copier goes out at just the time of your meeting, where you have this incredible opportunity in front of you. One of my churches, every time right before we had a breakthrough, the copier or a computer would go down in the office every single time. We were getting ready. We were introducing a budget. We had all these possibilities going on, and we lost the budget report. Or the budget, like the envelopes or whatever. We had this whole ceremony going, and the stuff is gone. And I'm on the phone with my administrative assistant, who was charismatic, and we're going through drawers. I'm like, Paulette, where is it? Are you sure you didn't take it home? Blah, blah, blah. We can't find it. I said, well, I wonder where it is. And we found it a week later in the he was our equipping minister. We got away with calling him the minister of equipping. It was in Garrick's drawer in the back of one of the drawers. How the heck did it get there? I guarantee you with absolute 100% of a guarantee, Garrick did not put it there. You know, who knows? But you don't have to know. You just know it's warfare. And that tells you then you are so on the right place. I am blithering. I have to go. You guys have to go. Can I pray us out of here? Yeah. Oh, Ashley, please. I see your hand.
I just have a quick question about our final assignment.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't get to go to the walk through the syllabus, so maybe I missed it. But you've got March 6th as a due date and March 12th as a due date.
Well, isn't that lovely? March 12th. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I just want to make sure that I got it in on time. So
March 12th. My papers, I always do a final assignment. I never do. I taught ethics for a couple of rounds and I had like a couple of things to do, but now all of my classes, you'll have a final assignment and it's always due the Saturday after the last Saturday of class.
okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sorry about that. Okay. Jesus, again, I have to thank you right now for being our Prince of Peace. And thank you that you overcome all arrows of all attacks, everything of the enemy, particularly when we're working for what it is that you have for us to do, that you've given us to do, that you need for us to do. And I pray specifically, Lord, for spiritual protection, for all around, of course, but specifically for those with whom I'm on this Zoom, these colleagues in ministry, and also for the others of us who aren't able to be here this morning. Thank you for the way they love you. They love your church, the way they love your kingdom, for the steps that they take, the ways they put themselves out there, the ways they ask questions. I thank you. Thank you for the ways that they continue to seek out your will, to lay themselves out and before you, to care for your church, the ways that they are and the ways that they want to. Continue to grace them with wisdom and opportunities, Lord. Give them patience where patience is needed, growth as growth is needed. Confidence. Give them confidence and courage and a boldness. Raise up their self-esteem where esteem is needed, Lord, so that they are able to be the ministers that you have called them to be, and Jesus, to do the ministry that you need them to do, the work that you need them to do. Just continue to make yourself clear, to speak to us boldly for all that is going on in this world, Lord. Jesus, oh my gosh. May it be turned for your good. Of course, we ask for peace. We ask, though, I ask, Lord, that you take our witness and testimonies, that you give us opportunities to share you with even just one other person in these next 48 hours, and that you take and give that person courage and boldness and opportunity to take opportunity to share that with another, so that the sharing will happen not just in our little corner, but all around the world, Lord, and that people will come together so that you can rule, so that you will be in hearts, and that hearts will move minds, and that peace may indeed ensue. Not that the peace we want, but the peace that only you can give, that with rest. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
I'll see you on the forums. Okay, let me know if you have questions.
Have a good Lent, everybody.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
Eat lots of pancakes on Tuesday. Eat some for me, please.
Punchkis.
Wait, what are they?
Punchkis.
Drunskies.
Punchkis. They're a Polish pastry that you eat on Fat Tuesday.
That's right.
Ooh, kunchki.
And we've got a bakery here that makes them beautiful.
Ooh, We have a Polish cafe here. I'll have to go see if we can get them and try them.
Yeah, you can't buy them at Meijer. You can't buy them at Walmart. You got to buy them at a real bakery.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. We'll see if we can find them. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I'm ending for all. Bye.
Bye.